surgery match debrief session. My name is Jalika Patel. I'm one of the 4 org leaders for the M1 class, along with Al, Julia, and Aman. Today, we're going to be having 2 of the M4s review the match process and go through some of the match results, followed by some questions moderated by Todd. So thanks so much for all the M4 panelists for being here today, and to Todd for really taking your time to share your insight and your experiences. So we're really looking forward to it. So just please feel free to unmute and ask questions. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll definitely be monitoring it throughout. We're also recording this session, so if anyone has any comments about that or is not okay, just definitely let us know. And I will give it off to Amber and Yusha to show their presentation.
Just 1 second, bear with me, guys. Just gonna pull up the thing
No
and then we can pick it off. Hey, Yesha, would you be able to share from your end? I'm having some trouble on my end.
I can do that. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, sounds good. Let me know when we're ready.
I think we're ready to go.
Okay, sounds good. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. We're just going to be doing a brief post-match panel. Sorry. There a moment. Sorry about that. I'm Yesha. I'm a 4th-year med student at Robert Wood Johnson, and Amber and I are going to be going over a little bit about the statistics, as well as a little bit about the own internal survey that we sent out to our 4th-year med students. So this is a little schedule of today's meeting. So we're just going to be talking about the application components, the timeline, an overview of the match process, a little bit about the 2022 orthopedic surgery match data from the ERAS and the NRMP, as well as what it looks like to be a Robert Wood Johnson class of 2022 average match applicant, as well as a little bit of our advice, which is then going to be followed by the 4th-year med student panel. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the components. So I know that for the 1st and 2nd year med students on the call today, this is going to be a really helpful slide for you just to get a brief overview of what it means to apply into orthopedic surgery or any residency program in general. So first, you're going to be putting in some of your biographical information. You're also going to need a personal statement. The MISPE is a medical school performance evaluation that is provided by the medical school student affairs deans. And then you also will be including your CV, which has research, work, and volunteer experiences listed on there. Then there's also letters of recommendation that is a part of your application process. And so depending on the program that you apply to, there is a specific requirement of the number of orthopedic letter of recommendations. some programs require non-orthopedic letters and some require a chair letter of recommendation. Some additional information depending on the program as well. Some programs require you to have a personal statement that is personalized for that particular program, and they'll provide you with information on that. Other programs may require you to submit a supplemental application, an essay, or even a video. So it really depends on the program that you're applying to, and you really want to start keeping that in mind when you're going through this application process. And now what is new for the 2023 orthopedic surgery applicants is really the supplemental ERAS application, which our class did not go through. So I have a few slides on that just so you have a brief overview of what to expect. So this supplemental ERAS application will require you to put in your geographic preferences by region or by urban or rural setting. You can also put in information regarding your most meaningful or impactful experiences and life events, as well as program signaling. So I have another slide on that. As you can see, I've highlighted orthopedic surgery, and it says that orthopedic surgery applicants can signal up to 30 programs. So programs and program directors are still figuring out what it's going to look like, but I just wanted to make sure you had this at the back of your head that this is going to be another component of the 2023 application cycle. So now just going.
Yeisha, what does signaling mean?
So signaling is where students can send out kind of like a signal that I would really like to come to this program. Certain program directors have been saying that if it's your home program or your away rotation program, then they already know that you're interested because you took the time to come out and check them out. This could be if you want another program, say you didn't get a chance to rotate at, it'll just give you an opportunity to say, hey, I'm interested in your program. So program directors are still figuring out what it's going to look like. So I would stay tuned for more information about that in the next couple of weeks to months. So now just going over the application timeline. So the 2023 application timeline hasn't been released yet. And so I just put a summary of what to expect. So for us in September 1st, we could begin to start submitting applications, and September 29th was when programs could begin downloading and viewing applications. So in essence, if you submitted September 2nd versus September 28th, it makes no difference because programs will begin to start reviewing on September 29th. And you really want to make sure that you have all of your information in by that time because certain programs may not go back to re-download applications after September 29th has passed. For us, we then had a universal interview offer release date, which was on November 15th, which was when all of us got most of our interview offers. Almost, I would say about 75 to 80% of programs participated in this interview offer release day. And so that was when a lot of us got most of our offers. And then after 48 hours, we had the opportunity to accept or decline the interview offer. The interview season for orthopedics is actually on the later side compared to other specialties. We have November end to early February is pretty much the orthopedic surgery interview season. On March 2nd, we had to submit our rank list for matching, and March 14th was when we found out if we matched or not, and March 18th was match day. So again, look out for the 2023 application timeline. They haven't released that yet. So, however, they did release the supplemental application timeline, which I put in the PowerPoint, and I also put the link below so you could access that easily. So now just going over some of the ERAS and the NRMP 2022 data. Let me just minimize the screen here. Okay, so there were a total of 210 programs that were in the cycle this year. That is an increase of 2 from last year. We also had an increase of 7 more residency spots from last year, bringing a total of 875 total PGY1 positions. This year, there were 0 unfilled PGY1 positions. Last year, there were 2. And 80% of these spots out of the 875 PGY1 positions were filled by US senior MDs. So I just want to define that term. US senior MDs is equivalent to saying that they are fourth year medical students. So there were also 1727 ERAS applicants. So that means that 1,727 individuals applied to at least one orthopedic surgery program. Most individuals applied to about 86 and a half applications. And the total number of applications received by a program was around 774. And the NRMP participants, what that means is that the individuals that participate in NRMP are individuals that ranked a program. So there were 1,470 individuals that ranked at least one orthopedic surgery program. So I wanted to show the match rate depending on whether it was from the ERAS data, the NRMP data, and then our own Robert Wood Johnson data. So in ERAS, this first box is really looking at individuals that applied to at least one orthopedic surgery program. So if we look at that data, of those 1,727 individuals, there were 50.67 was the match rate. However, if we look at the NRMP data, which is individuals that ranked at least one orthopedic surgery program, then the match rate is 59.52. And then our Robert Wood Johnson fourth year medical school class, out of the 18 of us who applied for orthopedics, 10 of us matched.
All right, so I could take it over from here just to kind of go over the survey we sent out internally to our own RWJ students. Initially, the goal was to kind of give you guys an understanding of people matched and unmatched. Kind of midway through, Yesh and I made the decision to kind of mostly just give you guys the information about the matched applicants, since we only really got 2 response. Oh yeah, sorry, I turned off my camera on purpose. My internet's a little spotty right now, so I was hoping it would help with my connection. But yeah, we only really got a response from 2 unmatched applicants, so we decided wasn't really giving a fair understanding of those who were unmatched. So we decided to give just the match data. So in total, we had 12 of our 18 applicants this cycle respond to the survey, 10 matched, 2 unmatched, and 9 who matched into orthopedics. Oh, sorry, Isha, could you move the slide for me? So just going over some of our academic statistics, the mean step 1 score was 246.9, and the mean step 2 score is 255.2. On the right, I just have, that's the national averages from the 2020 NRMP survey. So pretty similar to that. And we also asked everyone who had taken the survey when they took their step 2, and there's kind of a decent spread. 3 took it at the end of their 3rd year, 2 took it 4th year prior to ERAS submission, and 4 took it after ERAS submission. So just for those of you who don't know, kind of traditionally orthopedics in general hasn't cared a lot about step 2 score. So kind of the sort of the knowledge, the information that people were getting was that if you were comfortable with your step 1 score, it was at or above the average, you could delay taking your step 2 score until after the ERAS submission. So that's not an extra thing to worry about. And then you can kind of take it at your own comfort later without less worry. Next slide. Yeah. Continued, we kind of had a unique application cycle this year between those of us who took a research year and those who didn't. So some of us had graded 3rd year clerkships, and many of us didn't have graded clerkships. So of those, we had 3 who took the graded and 6 pass-fail system. Of the 3 who did get graded, these are the amount of honors they received through the clinical grades. 1 person got 0 honors, 1 got 4, and 1 got 7. As for AOA, 7 of the 9 people who applied this cycle or matched this cycle were inducted into AOA, which is a pretty large percentage compared to those in the national survey, which was around 40.3%. 2 of those were junior AOA, and 5 of those received senior AOA. And we didn't have anyone who was inducted into the Gold Humanism Honor Society. So when you go through your ERAS, there's only really three distinctions whenever you put in an experience. You can either list it as a work experience, a volunteer experience, or a research experience. So you always keep that in mind when you're looking at these surveys, that volunteer experiences typically include leadership and other things as well that don't fit into either work or research. The mean number of work experiences we had was 3.6. Mean number of volunteer experiences was 5.9, and mean number of research was 7.6. And I also broke it down by those who did take a research year and those who didn't. Those who did take a research year had slightly high national averages on the right side. Continue. So I broke down kind of the nitty gritty of the research based on those who didn't take a research year versus those who did, since that's always kind of a question that comes up is, should I take a research year or not? You can kind of take a look at the three we had this cycle apply with a research year, the number of publications they received compared to those without. So looking at published manuscripts, those who didn't take a research year published 4 manuscripts compared to 11.7 in the research group. As far as posters, there was 8 compared to 4 in the research group. Podium presentations, 4.7 compared to 0.17. And book chapters kind of sparse for both. As far as the NRMP data, I have it on the bottom there. It's 14.3, but that number kind of includes everything combined from that breakdown that we included.
Emma, we have a question in the chat. Someone asked, what qualifies as an experience? For example, how substantial should an experience in each category be?
So that kind of depends on you, honestly. Different people will tell you different things. I guess kind of the way my advice would be, and some of the other M4 students can chime in, is it's something that is worth talking about. Something that you did, I would generally recommend it's something that you spent a significant amount of time doing, because if it's on your application, it's fair game for an interview. So you have to ask yourself, is this something I'm willing to talk about on my interview and be like questioned about? If yes, then I think you can include it if you think it adds to your application. But if it's something you feel like you can't really speak to, you weren't that involved in it, and it's just fluff, I would leave it out. You know, Yesha showed you guys earlier just how many applications each of these programs are getting. They don't want to read way too much. So if it's just fluff, I would leave it out.
Yeah, I wouldn't put too much weight in the number of each experience that you're putting on your application. It's really much more about the quality, because none of these program directors are filtering you out based on the number of volunteer experiences you had. They just more want to see if there's anything interesting there.
So this cycle, you know, due to obvious limitations, our mean number of away rotations was 1.2. I think some of the response of getting 2 is that some people here were able to do an away rotation, a kind of pseudo away rotation at Monmouth that we were able to establish. You know, I know this coming year, sort of you have like a limit of 3 away rotations, and potentially in the future that can go away entirely. As regarding letters of rec, on average, people receive 4 letters of recommendation. And for those of you who don't know, when you're submitting on ERAS, you can kind of customize which letters of rec you want to send to each individual program. And the minimum you send is going to be based on that program, but the maximum you can send to any one program is 4. And the mean number of letters of rec gotten from people who weren't RWJ faculty were 1.1. So usually this kind of can come from research mentors that you've done a research year with, just a mentor you've had in general, or from someone that you met during an away rotation that you felt could speak to your character. As far as the application process, for those of us who matched, none of us had dual applied this cycle. The mean number of applications was 100.3, ranging from 68 to 155. And the mean number of interviews received were 14.8. Interviews attended were 14.1, and programs ranked on NRMP are 14. And you can compare that to the national average, which was 12.3. Kind of, I guess the overall thing to take here is most people who got interviews took their interviews and then ranked them. I think, you know, sometimes people will ask about, should I rank every single program I interviewed at? And, I think for a field like orthopedics, where it's very difficult to match, often the answer is probably yes, unless there's some significant red flag that you notice at a program and you could just never, you would rather go unmatched than seeing yourself at that program. As far as where people fell on their rank lists, on average, people ended up at their number 2 choice, with 4 people, 44% of the cohort ending up at their number 1 choice, and 22% ending up at their number 2 choice. The rest distributed between 3 and 5. And we had around 44% of those who responded matching at a place that either the home rotation, RWJ, or a place that they did an away rotation at. There's kind of this new thing that kind of arose starting last year, was this concept of virtual away rotations. And they've kind of had some scrutiny about how useful or helpful they've been. At our own program, no one matched at a place that they did a virtual rotation at.
Just everyone keep in mind that there were only 1 away rotation per person last year. This number is actually historically closer to 80%.
Yeah. We also asked people to tell us a little bit about how they felt about the number of apps they submitted and interviews attended. Most people felt that actually applied to a good number of programs, and some actually felt that they applied to too many. And generally, people felt that they attended the proper amount of interviews. And so this is kind of, I give you snippets before just to compare. This is the 2020 NRMP survey that was released, showing you sort of the, national statistics on those who matched versus those who didn't match and what they looked like. And, kind of, I'm not sure if everyone's heard, but I remember hearing about, 12 being this magical number of interviews you want to receive, and sort of just want to show you guys where that number sort of comes from. It comes from this NRMP data where, as you can see, once you've ranked 12 programs that you've interviewed at, you have over a 90% chance of matching. And that's also the case for orthopedics. This year, for our own program, it was slightly higher, but remember, a much smaller number of people applying here compared to everyone overall. We had around 14 for those who matched. Just want to go over some, part of the survey, we had also asked everyone kind of to give some tips, tricks, advice that they had. Tried to compile them here, and, so you guys can read it. And then, later in the Q&A section, we can cover anything that wasn't covered here or go into it deeper. First, we have this is also our match list from our current class. So, people always ask about what resources are helpful for orthopedics. So there's quite a few. These are some of the ones that we generally found pretty helpful. Everyone will tell you to get Netters and Hoppenfeld, and you can always buy the latest version on Amazon, or there may or may not be ways to acquire the PDF for free somewhere if you don't mind doing that. And generally, these are kind of 2 of the cornerstones for, not just as medical students, but as a resident. Netters is a good way to kind of learn some of the anatomy that you need to know for orthopedic surgery. As a medical student, you're often not going to be asked about the nitty-gritty of procedures. Attendings are going to ask you questions about anatomy. So it's a good thing to review if you're going on a hand service, brush up on the hand chapter, and so on and so forth. Hoppenfeld kind of has some nice pictures and descriptions of approaches that you'll see for common procedures. So before you go in the OR, you can always ask the residents or other students, oh, do you know what approach Dr. So-and-so uses for this case? They'll be more than glad to tell you, and you can read the night before through Hoppenfeld, just so you can have a good idea of what the surgical approach is, what you're going to be seeing, and get some pimp questions right too, which is always nice. Ortho bullets, it can be pretty helpful on the fly when you're asked to go see a consult or something. There's a topic that you're not really familiar with. You can pull it up real quick, get some quick facts on it that can be helpful. It's not very comprehensive though. It's just helpful kind of to get some quick tips, but it's not very, one of the other things that I found pretty helpful and others found pretty helpful that came out once COVID started was something called Ortho Access. This is a series of lectures given by attendings at multiple hospitals on very common orthopedic topics. I know personally, going into my rotations, I watched through these and I felt like they were very helpful to understand some of the basics that were difficult for me beforehand. ViewMedio is actually a source that Dr. Monica had turned me on to, which is just if you can make a free account on there, and oftentimes they have, attendings going through surgical techniques that are very common and that similar to the ones that you'll be seeing in the OR. So if you want to get, sometimes it's hard to picture what you're going to actually be seeing on a live person compared to some of the diagrams you see in these other textbooks. It's just helpful to go through it and see what the surgery might look like ahead of time. Handbook of fractures, I've heard some mixed things about. You can see it gives you a lot of the classifications of different fractures that you may be asked about. It's a good quick reference to read through. Of course, there are others that, we may talk to you about later. Just some general rotation advice for everyone. Always be prepared. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's always helpful to find out what the cases are going to be for the next day that you're going to be seeing and read up on them, whether it be Hoppenfelds, Ortho bullets, or whatever resource you want to use. If you're going to go into a case, you should be prepared to be asked about it. And, not just for the questions, but also, when you read up about it, you'll be able to ask more intelligent questions that show that you're invested, as well as be able to sort of help out and show that you're a part of the team. Similarly, on days where you're not in the OR, if you're going to head to clinic, it's always helpful to learn the common exam procedures, the physical exam procedures you're going to be performing. For example, if you know you're going to be at Dr. Monica's clinic, you can find out from the residents that he sees a lot of patients with shoulder problems. So, you want to brush up on your shoulder exam before a day with him. Or if you're going to be in with one of the joint surgeons, you want to look up your post-op exam for them. Something that, I didn't really realize is that everything you do is being noticed, even if it doesn't seem like it. A lot of times when you're a student, a lot of things that are happening that you do seem to go unnoticed. People won't really acknowledge them at the time. But I know personally is at the end of the rotation, Dr. Gatt will sit with you and he'll be like, oh, here's what so-and-so told me about what you've been doing. So you kind of just the thing to know is that everyone is always watching everything you're doing, even if they're not telling you about it or, patting you on the back for it, because that'll seldom happen. And yeah, first person to come in, last person to leave. That's kind of general advice for rotations as a medical student. You shouldn't be showing up late and you shouldn't be leaving early, especially for a field that you're trying to get into. Todd, I remember, told us multiple times last year, if you come in on time, you're late. So always show up a few minutes early. A big thing about, when you look at these surveys for orthopedics in general, what's commonly stated as one of the most important things program directors look for is this concept of goodness of fit for a program. And a lot of times with that it's kind of this vague thing, but it breaks down to like, will this person be a good part of our team for the next 5 years that they're going to be here? And a really good way to show that is by trying to become a part of the team and helping make things run efficiently. As a student, it can seem hard to do that because you don't know anything compared to a lot of the people on the team, but there are a lot of things you can do that seem simple enough, but can actually make be a big help to the team. For example, there are simple things like sitting in on morning rounds and hearing that, oh, patient so-and-so needs to have a dressing change. And that's not a very complicated thing to do. It can only, might take the intern a minute or two to do a dressing change. That's a minute or two you can save and do something else that's, slowing him down for the day. And if you're that person that's, going up to him and be like, hey, I can help with this dressing change, that saves him minutes and that really speeds up the process of his day or gives him time to have lunch, and those things go noticed. So that's kind of what I was saying here with anticipation versus what can I do to help. A lot of times med students fall into that trap of asking, oh, what can I do to help? And in the moment, the residents are going to be really busy with their own stuff. They're not going to know what you can and can't do. So it's easier for you to be that person that's listening during morning rounds, figuring out what needs to be done, and then offering up, being like, hey, here's the thing I know how to do and I can do it, and really help the team. And the final thing is never complain. The residents are working brutal hours. No one wants to hear a medical student, complain and be like, oh, this is so hard, when you're, it doesn't really show that type of camaraderie that you want to be displaying. Just for some specific advice regarding the home rotation RWJ, we actually had someone mention that very few people actually rotated on the spine service, which was true. And the two who did mention that it was actually a really great experience with a lot of time in the OR and a lot of one-on-one time with some of the attendings. So just something as you guys go into your orthopedic rotations to consider eventually. A few of us kind of took that opportunity, but maybe some of you will. And another rotation that kind of stood out was trauma. It's a great rotation because there's multiple residents on that rotation. Usually it's a 1, a 3, and a 5. So you get to work with multiple residents. And also there's a lot going on trauma. You see a lot of bread and butter orthopedics, which is really good for you to learn, and also really good. There's always usually a lot of things to help out with there. You can see consults, help out the team, and learn as well. As for away rotations, it's kind of a lot of advice when it comes to away rotations. Your choice of aways is important. It can secure interviews. It's never really a guarantee that you will get an interview, but the programs, from past surveys and kind of historical data, it's been seen that, people tend to like people who rotated at their programs. It shows that you're actually very interested in going to that program and can show them if you're a good fit for their program. Another, piece of advice was that, on I guess Canvas now, you can look at where past RWJ students have matched and rotated. The match data for the past several years is freely available on there. So you guys can go on there, look them up, find their contact info and reach out. Most of them are more than happy to chat with you about the program they're at. Sort of kind of some traditional knowledge that that was spouted was that it can unlock a geographic region. Maybe you're someone that has no ties to the Midwest or California, but you really envision yourself training there. People have said that you can do away rotations at those locations to sort of open them up. This year in particular, it seems like geography played a big role in interviews and matching for orthopedics. But it seems, this is kind of anecdotal based on people I've talked to that had chosen to go to rotations in these other geographic regions. It's kind of a mixed bag as to whether or not they got a lot of love from those regions after rotating in a program there. So just keep that in mind. As we mentioned, it can also earlier, it could be a source of letters of recommendation that you can get outside of your program, which can often be important because you want to show potential places you're applying to. It's not just your own program buttering you up. This person's actually a really strong applicant, and people at multiple programs think that. And one of the things, I'm not sure if it was unique to this year because we only had the one away rotation, but I'm not sure what the other M4's experiences were, but for me, every single interview I was on asked me why I did my away rotation, where I did it. So that's just something to keep in mind.
We have another question from the chat. Someone's asking if you could talk a little bit about the away rotation application process or system.
Sure. So the away rotation process, so you have to look up every individual program. I'd say the majority of programs are involved in something called VSAS, which is sort of kind of like the formal way to apply for away rotations. But you should go to each program you're interested in, go to their website because they may have different guidelines of how to apply. They may be outside of the VSAS system, or they may have different deadlines on when to submit things and what things they want submitted. But you can generally find most of them on VSAS. From there, you kind of add them to your list. You pay for them, of course, and then you submit the necessary details. Some of them will want something akin to a personal statement or why you want to rotate there. Some will want a step 1 score report or step 2 score report. Some will want nothing. It just kind of depends, just the information, you send it out to them. And then kind of the system tracks a long time until they receive all the documents. And then it'll tell you if they extend an offer to you or not. And then from that point, if they do extend an offer to you, I think you have something like 2-3 weeks to say yes or no. If you respond in that time saying no, or you can respond saying yes. You might hear sometimes about people saying, oh, is it bad to decline an offer? Should I reach out to more away rotations than I have available positions? Kind of the teaching has been for that first step where you get that offer, it's okay to say no to programs at that point if there's another offer you want to take instead of them. What can be problematic is if you say yes and then later on email them, be like, sorry, I said yes, but I can't make it. I've heard anecdotally from people in the past that even if they've done that, they've still managed to secure interviews as long as they've given them enough time in advance so that they can find another student to take their position. So obviously don't wait till the day before your rotation is supposed to start and then tell them, hey, I can't make it.
I would also say that there are sometimes scholarships available for completing away rotation. So that can include a stipend as well as waiving some of the registration fees. So if you're interested in doing an away rotation at a particular program, check out their website, check out their social media accounts to see if you can qualify to apply for a scholarship as well.
Regarding letters of rec, it's never too early to ask for them or even tell attending that, I want to get an a letter from you, just to kind of test the waters, see if they're interested in writing a letter for you, if they think you're someone they would write a letter for. And always send them, if they say yes, always follow up with an email with pretty explicit instructions. I have the link here for you guys for this thing called the eSLOR, which is a standardized letter of recommendation form that's being used more and more as the years have been going on. When you look at the requirements for programs and you apply to them, a lot more are saying they either strongly prefer, or some programs are even requiring now that you have an eSLOR for your letters of recommendation. So I would just say, might as well just send them out to everyone and have them just in case. You want to give them, so sort of the idea here is that it was a way for in orthopedics to try to standardize letters of recommendation. It'll ask you questions about like, oh, which percentile would you put this applicant at compared to all students you've worked with, other questions, and then they still have a spot at the bottom where the attending or whoever you're asking can put in the narrative section. So you just send them out the instructions of how to fill out this form, how to download it, how to fill it out, and how to upload it. And you can just let them know that they can put the narrative in the bottom. It's less problematic when they later apply it to ERAS to just upload the one form altogether, as opposed to trying to upload both the eSLOR and the narrative separately. I've heard horror stories of one overriding the other and then people didn't have it. So just don't put yourself in that position. The general advice is the better and longer someone knows you, the stronger the letter is going to be from them, which can be very helpful during the application process. If someone can speak to your character well, that'll go noticed. Even people who interview you will even bring up specific letters or things from letters to you during the application cycle. That's not to say that sometimes it is the case where you may only have 2 weeks with a person to make 2 weeks with someone to make an impression on them. That's not to say you shouldn't ask them for a letter. You still should, but just something to keep in mind as to who you want to go for generally. And another piece of general advice is try to get at least one letter from every away rotation. It might not always be possible. You may not work with attendings enough to get those letters. But like I said before, it's important to show that people outside your own program like you. And another piece of advice that was given by one of the students is to try to at least get one letter from someone who's not in orthopedics. There were programs this cycle, if you look at their requirements, who ask specifically for this. So if you're on one of your third-year clerkships and it felt like you had a good relationship with one of the attendings, might as well ask for them, even if you're not going to that field. So just some quick things about mentorship. You can get them from anywhere. Generally, it'll be someone you worked with on a home or away rotation that you built a real strong relationship with during a research year. It could be residents, alumni, and there's also many professional organizations. I've listed a few here that are really involved in this process of mentorship that are more than willing to help out. And they're really great resources and advocates, not just for your own education, but they can tell you their own experiences. And they can also help reach out a lot of times to programs if they have ties there and help you get an interview or a second look or an away rotation. As far as the application process, it's never too early to start on your personal statement and updating your CV. I was given this advice and I didn't listen to it. And then I ended up kicking myself in the foot this cycle because it can take a lot of time to go through your personal statement. You're going to go through many drafts and, you want as many people as you can to read it and critique it to make sure it's as good as possible. Another thing that, I wish I appreciated more was personalizing your personal statement. Yesha brought up that some programs actually require you to submit a personalized statement for them. But even if it's not required, you can still do it. ERAS allows you to apply as many personal statements as you want. So if you really wanted to, you could apply to every single orthopedic program in the country and send a specific one to each of them. And, obviously you don't have to do that, but I would recommend doing as many as you see fit. At least my own anecdotal experience is that every program I sent a personal statement to that was personalized, I ended up getting an interview for them. And it almost made me wish that I had done it more if I had more time. And you don't have to obviously make the whole personal statement about them. The sort of way I went about it personally is that my last concluding paragraph, I would just personalize it for that specific program. Here's why I think I'd be a good fit for this program, and here's why I think you'd be a good fit for me, just something to that effect. But it kind of just shows them that's like, oh, this person's actually reading about us and knows what we're about.
I agree.
Yeah, we kind of mentioned earlier, more and more people are applying to more and more programs. So it's getting harder. We saw this thing of now you can signal to 30 programs. That's one way program directors are trying to figure out who actually wants to go there. So this is just another like thing in your armamentarium of how to show a program, I really want to come here. And review the application requirements of every program you apply to. It's a little tedious, but the way I did is I made an Excel sheet and went to every program's website and just figured out the specifics of their application process. It's a very easy way to get yourself kicked out at the first step if you didn't follow their requirements. I mentioned earlier 4 is the maximum, but some program will tell you we only want 3, or some will say a minimum of 3. Some will tell you we want a non-ortho letter. And so you just really want to keep track of that and make sure you kind of adhere to it, just so you don't get kicked out for missing something small. And yeah, again, programs are reviewing a ton of apps more and more each year. So try to keep the description, that gives you, I think, like 150 word limit for each description. You don't have to use that up. Try to keep it short and sweet, maybe use bullets to kind of make it easier to read on the eyes. And then, kind of the follow to that is review your application a million times. I can't tell you, I reviewed it a lot. I had other people review it. And even the day before ERAS submission, I was still finding grammatical errors or small errors there. So you really, really want to make sure there's nothing wrong with your application. So review it as much as you can. Another thing that I thought was pretty helpful that a resident had turned me onto was Grammarly. I think it's like a small $5 a month subscription type thing, but it essentially goes through all of your descriptions and it'll tell you, oh, here's how you can change the grammar of the sentence. It'll pick out spelling errors and stuff. And I found it super helpful. It picked out a lot of mistakes in my application. As far as the interview process, it really is all about practice. You can't practice enough. If you have a significant other, parents, friends who are willing to help you, practice your interview responses with them, because you're going to be asked some of these questions by almost every single program. Everyone's going to ask you to tell me about yourself. And it's a very generic, broad question that really lets you kind of tailor how the rest of the interview is going to go and go into directions that you want to go into. So have a short and sweet response to that. Everyone's going to ask you, why us? A lot of people ask you, how was it rotating at your XOA program? Why did you choose to rotate at this program? Everyone will ask you, what questions do you have for us? You can sort of have a few questions that you can ask to any program, but I really recommend trying to read about the program and ask some questions that would be very specific to them. It shows that you read about the program, and that's another thing to show that you care about going to that program. Another one that I was told to prepare for is why Ortho. I don't know about the other students' experiences, but I actually didn't get asked this one as much as I thought I was going to. I was expecting it at every interview, but something just to prepare for either way. You're advocating for yourself, so you need to be your own cheerleader. Obviously, don't be super conceited, but don't sell yourself short. People are going to be there trying to sell themselves, so try to sell your accomplishments as well. Remember, you're trying to show them that they want you. And ortho interviews tend to be pretty short compared to some of the other specialties. So keep your responses brief. You really don't, it'll vary, but you want to kind of keep your responses to under 2 minutes. You don't want to ramble on because they'll lose interest quickly. Post-interview communication, it can be helpful. It's kind of hit or miss based on people's experiences, but always be honest. Don't tell every program that you're their number one. Ortho is a small field and word can get around fast. And, even beyond just the application thing, if you do hopefully match into orthopedics, you don't want to leave a bad taste in people's mouth as someone who just, is lying to get ahead. And specifically listen to a program's instructions. After interviews, some programs will tell you explicitly, we want no post-interview communication. Listen to them. You don't want to hurt your application because you didn't listen to explicit request. That's it. So, we're going to open up the rest of the time to any questions that you guys have.
I want to start off by saying that was an excellent presentation, Yesha and Amber, and everyone who contributed. This is the first year that these guys put something like that together, and I'm sure they very much wish that they had that when they were a year back from now. It's an extremely valuable resource, especially in a very frequently changing environment where you don't know how many away rotations you're going to do, how many interviews you're going to get, what the step 1 and step 2 changes are. So doing this every year is going to be huge for you guys. And then also congratulations to everyone who matched and is here. For those who did match, you all worked extremely hard and all earned to match. There are a few people out there who unfortunately did not match, and they also worked extremely hard. So I hope that they all have success moving forward, and hopefully your presentation will help those guys as well. You guys want to, how many of you guys who matched are here right now?
I'm here.
Okay. All right, so how about everyone who matched just introduce themselves briefly and where you're headed next year, and then people can ask questions either to the whole group or to individuals.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Ray. I just matched at MedStar Union Memorial Hospital in Baltimore.
Matched at Montefiore in the Bronx.
I matched at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, Maryland.
Hey guys, I'm Alfredo. I matched at Montefiore as well.
And I'm Amber, matched at Northwell, Long Island Jewish.
I'm Mike. I matched at Robert Wood.
All right, so if anyone has any burning questions, they can bring them up, but we also had some pre-made questions that I could lob up to you guys to get started. All right, well, first, I have a personal question. Did you guys actually encounter programs that required a non-ortho rec letter? Because I never saw that before.
Yes, UCSF did.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah,
I
think they were the only one, at least the only one on my list that didn't. I didn't have a non-ortho letter. I just ended up not applying to them.
Are they a new program?
No, they do it every year.
That's interesting. I don't remember that, but that's definitely going to limit the number of applications you get. Anyway, so what were some things that you guys were told about the application and interview process that ended up not being true?
Hey, Todd. So I'm not sure if I can think of anything. What comes to mind is the talk that you gave us right before our interviews. And you kind of gave us a very wide range of everything that we could possibly see. So everything from the basic things that you should always be prepared for to like the wacky and out there questions that we might get. And I kind of experienced kind of a pretty broad range of things. So I don't think there were any real surprises. And there wasn't anything that I can remember that was like, I was told and it ended up just simply not being true or anything like that.
Yeah, kind of going off that, I actually didn't really end up getting many, if any, ethics questions, or I didn't have any knowledge rooms. So it's really variable depending on the program. So you just kind of have to be prepared for everything.
And to that point, I'm sure it'll be very different next year if we go back to in-person interviews. You'll definitely be getting some skills rooms, so everyone watch out.
Yeah, I think it shows like how variable each of our experiences were for applications. I had a few knowledge rooms, I had a few ethics rooms, I had a few skills rooms too. So I think it's pretty variable for each applicant's experience.
Mhm.
Could you guys
Can you go
explain
into
like
more
what types of,
detail?
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Julia.
I was going to ask if you guys could just explain like what types of skills you would be expect, or like what types of things would be in the knowledge rooms and ethics rooms.
That was my same question.
Yeah, so I only had a couple knowledge rooms, but most of them were like you're the resident in the ED. You have 3 fractures that come in. Like these are the 3 types of fractures. Which one are you going to see first, and what questions do you want to ask like the ED staff in terms of like prioritizing each fracture. I've heard like as far as like skills, like some of my friends who had like an in-person interview like had to shoot like cups with like a Nerf gun or something like that. I heard stories about how like some program like was mailing people a box that they had to open up in front of the camera on interview day and had to like do some sort of like hand related exercise. So it really can kind of range for pretty much anything.
Me and Joe Mark could probably speak to that part better because we actually had the in-person interviews. I had to shoot a K-wire through a large block of styrofoam. I had to play Operation. I had to play, what's the game where you have all the little shapes in the board and it pops if you don't get them in time? Anyone? All right, well, I had to play that one. I had to take a blueprint of a 3D structure with 2D schematics and build it out of Play-Doh while answering interview questions. I had to sew 2 pieces of craft singles together. I had to taste test 2 different cups of Coca-Cola to say which one was diet and which one was regular. So it gets pretty weird.
Yeah, I guess I was asked to sew the 2 lap sponges together. I played Operation as well. I did some drilling of some PVC pipe and measured it, and there was some hammering, some just nailing, working with a wrench. It was nothing. The ones I did weren't anything crazy. And as far as knowledge rooms are concerned, what I had were similar to what was described previously with just using, getting 4 fractures and saying, which one do you want, how do you prioritize? What do you want to see first and why? And can you tell us about this fracture? Is there any additional studies you'd like to get, and that kind of thing?
I think to add on that, I had for the skills for an in-person interview, I did have the Nerf gun thing while answering questions, trying to shoot down targets. On the virtual end, I had one ask me to untie my tie and retie it as they were asking me questions. Regarding knowledge rooms, I had very few. One was simply just reading. They would just put up x-rays and ask me to read them, what I saw, what I would classify it as, what I want to do. And another one where I just walked through a sample case and then had to answer some knowledge-based question like, oh, what nerve would this be? What would you do to test it? That kind of stuff.
I'll say that your Robert Wood rotation really does help prepare you for the knowledge rooms. The knowledge room that I had to do was actually a case that Todd and I did together on my ED rotation, and he grabbed me aside to go through it. So it was exactly that case. So it really does help prepare you.
Yeah, I'll kind of second that. I think I was most scared for the knowledge rooms, but the 2 I had, I felt like very comfortable going through them after the RWJ rotation.
The hardest thing about the knowledge rooms is that even if you do 4 months of ortho rotations your 4th year, there's just things that you haven't seen. So you just gotta hope you get lucky.
So I actually have a quick question. Especially now with step 1 being pass fail, research is like being heavily weighted. And I know at MSOS they were saying that if it's on your CV, you better know it like inside and out, because one of his mentees was a first author and didn't really know what was going on in that paper. But now to that end, if we have like 15, things listed on our CV, what kind of questions did you really prep for, just to make sure that you covered all your bases?
I think anything about your research is fair game. You know, I would say any research, even if you think it's like the most basic study and no one's gonna ever ask it, it'll get asked about. There were studies like no one's ever gonna ask me about that, and it got asked. There were like random case reports I did that got asked about. You know, you have to remember you're going to a field where people are experts on some of the things that you're doing research in as well. So they're gonna know it really well, and you can't really, you know, BS your way through it. You're gonna have to know it because they're gonna ask you follow-up questions. You know, I guess to speak to it, one of my studies that I was working on, so we had found something like a higher infection rate in one of the groups, and the person was asking me like why I thought that was happening. So I had to kind of talk through some of what we had written in the discussion. So, you know, even if you are fifth, sixth, seventh author on a paper, you should be able to speak to it as though you were the primary author.
Before each of my interviews, I studied my manuscripts like I was taking a test, because they could ask you any little detail.
Sometimes what happens is that the preceptor that you do research with, they could have gone to med school with, they could have gone to residency with. So everyone is pretty connected in the small orthopedic world. And so a few of my interviews, some of the panelists would ask me, oh, I went to residency with X, Y, and Z. Can you tell me a little bit more about this particular project rather than others? So you have to be really prepared for anything that could come your way.
Yeah, I would say most programs said like they just picked a paper at random and just said, tell me about it. So I had like a 60-second, you know, summary of each paper, just covering like the basics, like why we did the study, like how we did it in like a sentence or two, what we found, and then like why it's important. So for having that like prepared for each of my papers and projects, I found that was pretty helpful. And then that being said, they can ask like crazy specific questions, like they'll ask like I got asked on multiple interviews, like how many samples did you use in like this project or this project? And that's just stuff you have to know off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's kind of, there are also, I had some experiences where there were specific research rooms where the entire like 15-minute room was about your research. So you have to be able to carry a conversation about your research for those 15 minutes. And they'll get into minutia sometimes. They'll ask you like, oh, why did you do this statistical analysis over this? Why didn't you do this? So you really need to know your paper to be able to answer those kinds of things.
Also, typically you get a list of your interviewers kind of the day before or a couple days before. So you know what subspecialty the people who are interviewing you are in. So sometimes you can kind of predict like, oh, you know, if I'm interviewing with a bunch of spine guys and I have a spine paper, you know, I better make sure I know that one and, you know, review it maybe a little extra. So, and even, you know, some of the research rooms, sometimes you know which one is the research room and you can look at their field and then kind of prepare a little extra that way.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
I think also another thing to keep in mind, for me, at least my experience, I was asked the most about one of my non-ortho projects. So be ready to discuss ortho projects, non-ortho projects. If you have something that kind of stands out, you know, interviewers may kind of focus on that. So like one of mine was on culinary medicine, and it was something that a lot of interviewers had never heard. And so I was asked basically on every interview about that kind of project. So that's also just something to keep in mind also for some of them M1s, M2s, that you don't only have to do orthopedic specific research. You know, our orthopedic department is not the most academic, but there's definitely other avenues to be able to pursue research, whether through GenSearch, through some of the other departments, and it can still go a long way for eventually when you're applying.
There's a question in the chat. Someone's asking, what suggestions do you have for obtaining multiple research experiences?
I would say kind of like Wilfredo mentioned, you know, if, you know, obviously sometimes, especially at Rutgers, there's a lot of people who are trying to go into ortho. So there's a lot of people trying to get on all the projects here. I know personally, I had, you know, some trouble finding projects here in like, you know, M2, M3, and I ended up reaching out to other institutions and was able to get on projects virtually that way. So you don't have to limit yourself just to Rutgers if you can't find a project here. You know, cold email whoever, anyone and anyone you can. And you might be able to find a project that way.
So sometimes the professional organizations that we listed on the slide, they also have opportunities where you can connect with a mentor. So you can also reach out to mentors that way to see if they have any research opportunities available.
Those are great suggestions. So unfortunately for you guys, well, fortunately, unfortunately, there's a lot of you interested in orthopedics each year, a lot more than there used to be. It used to be rare for there to be more than 10 people applying ortho from Rutgers. And, now that there's upwards of 18, the research infrastructure is being built up to match that now. And it was not there previously. And, we have the same number of people applying as like big research institutions. So, you guys have to be very resourceful in the way you find research, and both of those suggestions were really good ways to go outside the box.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, I have a question based on some of the conversations that were talked about at MSOS yesterday by the program directors. They mentioned that for programs where you have a high number of applicants applying, it's smart for those individuals to kind of get together and make sure that there aren't more than maybe 3 people applying to the same programs. So for the M4s that just applied, I know that's kind of difficult, to like not have more than 3 people apply to the same program. How did you guys go about, being smart about who applied where and navigating that?
So I think the reality is, as far as applications go, we weren't, probably, if we're being honest. I don't think we really asked each other where we were applying. Everyone kind of just applied. And you're probably right to some degree with having 18 applicants from one school. We probably did self-cannibalize to a degree. What we did do though is like for away rotations, which we had created a list. You mentioned a lot of people interested, so we had created a list of everyone's interests as to orthopedic subspecialties they want to rotate at RWJ, and kind of using that list, we were able to create a schedule so that not too many of us were on one service at a particular time, and so that everyone could kind of get to experience the subspecialties they wanted to experience. And we created, I think it was something like, we all put down like 3 or 4 away rotation programs that we were interested in pursuing and put them in an order. And then based on that, we applied to our away rotation so that we didn't have like 5 people applying to one program. And I think it ended up working pretty well, because I think everyone kind of had a unique program. There was one program that had 2 of our RWJ students. So I think it worked out pretty well overall.
I think that ended up helping us also with interview invites, because yes, we did have a lot of individuals applying from the same school. We probably all applied to multiple programs that overlapped with each other, but we all did away rotations at different places, barring 1 or 2 people. And so I think that really helped spread us out also amongst the different programs, because if we got a letter of recommendation from that away rotation, that individual may have connections at different programs than other individuals at other programs. So I think that also could have helped us spread out with regards to where we got interview invites.
But also next year is going to be a little different or this coming year, because people are going to be doing 3 away rotations again. So it just gets a little more challenging. And I would reiterate that it's not impossible for more than one person to rotate at the same away rotation. It just means that you both got to work very hard while you're there. And as the class this year has shown, you can have multiple Robert Wood people matching at the same program. So I really wouldn't try to limit yourself too much.
I think especially, so I was one of those students that multiple of us were at the same site. So at Mount Sinai was Mason and I. And just because these programs are a lot bigger, you still have your chance to shine, because a lot of these orthopedic subspecialties, they really don't interact too much, especially when there's multiple hospitals involved. So you really still get your one-on-one time with your residents and with your attendings. And even if there's multiple you on, let's like quote unquote in the same month, you still aren't like bumping each other out of cases or anything like that.
And kind of on that topic, can you talk about how you guys chose where you did your away rotations?
Yeah, so when we were making the spreadsheet of where everyone was doing their away rotations, it was pretty obvious that everyone wanted to be in either Manhattan or Philly or Boston, which is like understandable, of course. So I wanted to kind of make sure that I wasn't kind of getting lost in the crowd. So I was looking for programs that were similar to Robert Wood in a lot of ways, more blue collar. And that's you're kind of just going off of reputation, and there's no perfect way to find the perfect away rotation. But I applied to thing like Temple, UConn, and Maryland. And UConn ended up just responding so quickly, and then like they only give you a week to decide yes or no, and you have to make sure you have something. So I just ended up saying yes to them. So it was good because it's more of a it's still in a city, but like the setting of Connecticut itself is a little bit more rural. So it was good because I got to see whether or not I'd be happy in a more rural setting or not. So that's how I made my decision.
One thing I'll say about that is that before you can decide where you want to go for your away rotations, you have to do some introspection and think about how competitive your application really is compared to other people. Because if you choose to do an away rotation at HSS and you're middle of the pack application, that's going to be a waste of your time. And similarly, if you're a superstar and you're rotating at like some little 2-person program in the middle of nowhere, just because you don't think highly of yourself, that's also a waste of your time. So you need to understand yourself before you can decide where is going to be the best place for you to rotate. And then, like they said, a lot of it's geography, but you can choose different types of programs too. You might want to pick like a program that does more research or a program that's more blue collar, et cetera, just so that you can get your feet wet and try to understand what the different programs have to offer.
So just to piggyback off of that, I know you said to like ask for letters of recommendation early. If let's say you're at an away rotation, are you asking like that last week, or are you waiting until after when you're sending like a thank you email? Like how would you go about that?
So I think it's always better to ask in person and then follow up with the thing later. I would usually ask sort of at the end of whatever scheduled period you have with that person. So for myself personally, at my away rotation, I was working with one attending for 2 weeks, and I had heard that she was willing to write me a letter. So at the end of the 2-week period, I asked her if she'd be willing, and she said yes. And then the next day, I just sent up a follow-up with all that information I'd mentioned with the eSlore, how to upload it, and all that. To follow up on that, sometimes, even at away rotations, the residents can be your ally in that sense. It can let you know, give you kind of an honest temperature of how a certain attending feels about you, and if there's someone worth asking for a letter of recommendation as well.
Usually away rotations are 4 weeks, and so I like doing them around the 3-week mark or early in the 3rd week, so that way if they agreed, then they could be like, okay, I want to watch her a little bit more, let me see what she's doing, and then they can like pinpoint certain things that they want to point out in their letter as well and pay a little closer eye as well to that.
One issue that I don't know how many of you encountered is that some away rotations, you're on the same service for 4 weeks, and others you do a different service every week. And if you're on a different service every week, it's darn near impossible to get a rec letter. So if you're able to find out that information ahead of time, that could be very important.
Yeah, I think it's important to consider that letters are not a guarantee, even if you do an away. Like I was able to get one for my away, but some of the students I rotated with, they were with 3 or 4 different attendings every week. So just keeping that in mind, and just like Amr said, using the residents kind of like to get a feel of which attendings will be willing to write letters, because not all letters are equal either.
Just to follow up, well, I guess it's not really piggybacking off of it, but I saw that you have an option to dual apply for residencies. Now, let's say someone did Gen Surg and Ortho didn't match in Ortho, but matched in Gen Surg. Is there any way to like convert later on to Ortho, or is that just like a done deal?
I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I would say with the current climate, it is highly, highly, highly improbable.
If you are a person who's borderline for making it into the ortho match, you can't take away half of your focus from getting into the ortho match. I've never seen it done successfully. Actually, that's not true. Someone last year dual applied into ortho and anesthesia and got into anesthesia.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, like when I had showed you guys that data earlier about people who matched versus unmatched, those who matched had ranked one specialty for orthopedics. So that really goes to show that, you know, we talk about how ortho is really looking for people who want to go into ortho. So you have to think about that. Do you want to show them this is someone who's also willing to do other specialties as well? You know.
I'll pose the question for each of you. Is there something you would tell yourself in your first and second years of medical school that you wish you knew or did differently?
So I decided on ortho pretty early. I wanted to do ortho going into medical school. And I think looking back for that, for me, it was definitely very helpful. Being able to use my entire time to my advantage. So I wasn't ever trying to like catch up on extracurriculars or research or anything like that. So I think that if you are early on in the process and you're interested in ortho, just given how competitive it is, to at least put your focus to it. And later on, if you choose not to do it, then it's perfectly fine to switch into a less competitive specialty. But trying to switch into ortho M2 or M3 it's a lot more challenging to do. And I think just for me, yeah, just going into medical school thinking ortho definitely paid dividends for me.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that because I didn't come into med school thinking ortho, and I was sort of interested in it in M1, but I didn't really commit to it till probably the start of M3. And I felt like I had to end up kind of playing catch up with, you know, jumping on a bunch of research projects and working throughout all my clerkships, you know, doing research all the time to just catch up. So if you can delineate whether you really want ortho early on, I think it definitely would help you out.
I think for me, I wish I would have done a little bit more networking early on, especially in first and second year. With how competitive ortho is getting, connections really do help you in trying to get to know more about the place, but also along the interview trail. So I was able to start that a little bit during my third year and fourth year a lot. But I think starting it early on, especially if you know that orthopedics is the field that you want to go through, you could definitely start early as a first year med student as well.
I would say even if you're 10% sure that you want to do ortho, you should put all of your eggs into that basket so that if you decide later that you are actually able to.
So yes, I hope I said that right. But I have a personal question for you, since you were able to give a presentation at MSOS yesterday. How did you go about finding that opportunity? And when you're presenting works like that, does it have to be something that's recent, or could it have been something that was already published or presented somewhere else? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I saw that opportunity through social media accounts. I didn't have an Instagram before third year of medical school, and I created it just for following all the different orthopedic accounts. And so I did that. I followed a few other residency accounts, which was really helpful, trying to find out more about the program, but also more information regarding their open houses during the interview trail. If they were holding a Q&A session or an Instagram live, that was really helpful. So I think it'll help you during your interview cycle as well, but that's how I found the MSOS opportunity. And you can just look at their program requirements and what their submission requirements are, and that goes for any type of abstract competition.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that and Todd's original question, for whatever reason, I feel like this year having an Instagram became super important. Like I know a lot of programs were advertising like that they were having like Q&A sessions during interview season or like before applications got sent out. And the only way you would have known about that is if a friend told you, or if you happen to like follow them on Instagram and see like that they posted a story about it. So that's certainly something that could be useful. Just be careful, because like the second you follow an account, like I'd say like 10% or 20% of the time they'll follow you. They'll try to follow you back, even if your account's private. So make sure that like it's cleaned up and there's nothing that's like grossly unprofessional on there.
I think as well with the Instagram, for me, it was helpful to get a bit more of a personal dive into residency. So like Amr mentioned before, a lot of residency programs are going to ask you like, do you have any questions for us? And getting kind of like that personal feel from some of the Instagram posts will give you like a little bit of a foundation for forming some of those questions. So yeah, maybe get an Instagram for this year if you guys don't have one.
With that being said, I just wanted to plug that ORIG just made a Instagram page, so you guys should follow it. We're going to be posting stuff soon.
All right, so this might be a good time for us to close out. You guys are going to send out the slides to everyone somehow. And then I highly recommend that you all have this set up so that next year it can be done very easily. I'm sure that if anyone's interested in putting together next year, you could talk to Amr about the survey and Aisha about the presentation. Thank you all for coming here. I think that this went really well. I'm glad that you all have this resource now.
Yep, and thank you so much for moderating, Todd, and Jomar for giving your words of wisdom as well.
Happy to help.
Thank you, everyone.